All right, today we're going to be solving single-step equations. We're first going to work on translating sentences into equations. So we're not going to be solving these ones. We're just going to practice at the very beginning. I'm going to go through and I'm going to circle the words and kind of write them into numbers and operations. And then we'll go through and we'll put it all together and make it look nice. So first we have a number b, okay, divided by, that can either be a division sign or a fraction. 3 is equal to, that's going to be your equal sign. 6 less than is a subtraction. The problem is when we have this little word than here, that means we're going to reverse the order. So here we have a c. It's not going to be written 6 minus c in the end when it's all said and done. It's going to be written as c minus 6, so it kind of switches. So to write this in completed form, we're going to write it as fractions because that's going to be the easiest thing to do in this class. So we're going to put b over 3 equals c minus 6. And that's finalized. All right, on the next one, I'm going to go ahead and do the same thing. So we have 15 more than, that's going to be addition, but it's also going to switch order. So I'm going to put my arrow showing it's going to switch. Z times 6 is y times 2 minus 11. So I've just gone through, I've circled everything. I've made sure I haven't forgotten anything. Now on this one, it's a little tricky. We need to write these things as simplified as possible. When we have something like z times 6, we wouldn't actually write that like that. The easiest way to write a number times a variable multiplied together is to just write them right next to each other. You don't need any kind of a multiplication sign. Make sure, though, you put the number first. So you're going to take the z times 6 and actually write it as 6z. And it's the same over here with this y plus 2. You're going to go ahead and write it 2y. So sometimes it's easier to simplify what you already have before you're going to go through and do the end result. Okay. Now, notice that because it said more than here, I put the arrows. Now, I switched the 15 and z, but since I combined that, I'm now going to switch the 15 and the 6z. So even though 6 wasn't until way down the equation, it's going to end up being the first thing I write. You've got to pay close attention to that. So our answer is going to be 6z plus 15 equals 2y minus 11. All right, we have one more here. I'm going to do the same thing. Okay. We have a number c. I'm just going to go ahead and write that right out in front, the c, multiplied by 6 is equal to 2. More than is going to be your addition. That switches places because of the word than. D. So to go ahead and write that simplified, we're, again, not going to write c times 6. We're going to write it as simplified as possible, just putting them together. And we're going to write the number first. So it's going to be 6c equals d plus 2. Okay? Let's look at it the other way around. Here, there's a number of different ways to translate this equation into a verbal sentence. You could use, for subtraction, you could use decrease, you could use minus, you could use difference, you could use less than. Okay, so there's a number of different correct ways we could say this. One of them might be 12, okay, minus 2 times the number x is equal to negative 5. One of them might be a number x times 2 is less than 12, or less than 12 is negative 5. Okay, one of them might be 12 decreased by 2 times the number x equals negative 5. So there's a number of different ways we can write that. Same with this one down here. I could say a squared plus 3 times the number b is equal to c divided by 6. I could also say a to the power of 2 increased by b times the number 3 is c over 6. Okay, I can also say a number a squared plus 3 times a number b is c divided by 6. So there's a number of different ways we can go through and we can write this problem. They're all correct. What you need to be aware of most of all is how to communicate with me in class. So if you have a problem like one of these on your paper, and a lot of people are struggling, and I say, hey, read me that problem, I'm going to do it on the board, I hope that you guys can read me the problem. All right, now we're just going to go on to solving one-step equations. All of these 4 equations are addition or subtraction equations, and you're always going to do the opposite operation. What you need to ask yourself in your head, and this is a process in your head that takes about 5 seconds. It's going to take a lot longer to explain. But the first thing you're going to do is identify a variable. So in this first problem here, your variable is h. And then you're like, okay, there's my variable. What's on the same side as the equal sign? So here's my equal sign here. So on the same side is a 12. So once you've identified your variable and what's on the same side as it, then you're like, all right, how is it attached? How is that 12 and that h, what mathematical operation attaches them? And you're going to look and you're going to be like, okay, subtraction. And just like it says up here, we're going to use the opposite operation to solve. So if it's subtracted, the 12, you're going to go ahead and add it. So we're going to start this equation by adding 12. All right? Remember there's an equal sign here. The only way to keep that equation equal or balanced is to do to the same thing to both sides. So if we're going to add 12 over here to the left-hand side, we also need to add 12 over here to the right-hand side. Okay? This negative 12 and positive 12 are going to cancel. They're going to zero out. That's what we were looking to do. We're going to bring down the h. And being careful of signs, different signs, you find the difference and take the sign of the higher number. The difference is 15. The higher number is negative. So it's negative 15. Again, you're going to go through the process for the second one here. You're going to say, okay, where's my variable? Right here, k. All right, here's my equal sign. What's on the same side as my variable? Okay, right here, 63. All right, how are this k and this 63 connected? You're going to look here, a plus sign. All right, it's added. I need to do the opposite, always the opposite. So I'm going to subtract. So you're going to go ahead and subtract 63 from both sides, again, making sure to keep it equal. Okay. The positive 63 and negative 63 cancel. You bring down your k, and 92 minus 63 is 29. All right, this next problem here, I'm going to spare you the whole commentary, but here's my c. It's attached by 102. It's attached by addition. You're going to do the opposite and subtract. So we're going to subtract 102, again, from both sides to keep everything equal. The positive 102 and negative 102 will zero each other out. They will cancel. We'll bring down the c. Doing the math here correctly, it'll be negative 66. All right, we have one more of these. This one's a little bit different order than what we're used to, okay, than all the other ones have been. Yeah, k is attached by a plus sign. It's 129 though. What we're doing is wanting to zero out that 129. So since that 129 is positive, we need to do the opposite. So since this is a positive, we need to subtract 129. Then you look at the equal sign here. You go all the way across the equal sign over to here and subtract the 129. Okay. Positive 129, negative 129 cancel. You bring down your k. K equals negative 171. Remember, when you have two negatives, you add them and you attach the negative. All right. Now we're going to do the exact same thing, but we're doing fractions, okay? Nothing is more difficult about this. You guys know how to do fractions. We've just gone over how to do the one-step equations. Now we're just going to kind of put it together and make sure you're practicing with your fractions. So here's your y. It's attached on the same side of the equal sign by a 4/5. All right, it's attached by addition here. So we need to unattach it. We need to subtract the opposite, 4/5. So I'm going to subtract 4/5 from this side. Subtract 4/5 from this side. Okay, my positive 4/5 and negative 4/5 cancel. I bring down the y. Now there's no way to just look at this and say, okay, 2/3 minus 4/5 and know it in your head. You're actually going to have to come down here and write 2/3 minus 4/5. Remember, when you're adding and subtracting fractions, you need a common denominator. You got to figure out what 2, 3, and 5 both go into evenly. That lowest number is going to be 15. So I'm going to come down here. I'm going to put a 15 for my common denominator. Now I'm going to look and I'm going to say, all right, to get from 3 to 15, I multiplied by 5. So if I multiply this 2 by the 5, I get 10. So my new numerator is going to be 10. Then you do the same on the other side. You say, okay, how did I get from 5 to 15? Well, I multiplied by 3. So if I take this top numerator, 4, and multiply that by 3, I get 12. Now you can do this math in your head. Okay? You have 10 minus 12. It's going to give you a negative 2 over your common denominator of 15. So your answer is negative 2/15. And you're done with that problem. Again, not any harder as far as the math and what we were learning. You're just now practicing your fractions. All right, one more of these here. We have the y. It's attached to the 2/3. It's attached by addition, so we're going to subtract it. Subtract 2/3 from both sides. The positive 2/3 and negative 2/3 cancels. We bring down that y from the top. Again, there's no way to just do 5/6 minus 2/3 in your head. You're going to want to come on your scratch paper and do 5/6 minus 2/3. And you're going to have to do your common denominator again. Now your common denominator of 6 and 3, what do 6 and 3 both go into evenly? The smallest number, it's actually 6. Okay, 6 goes into 6 evenly, 3 goes into 6 evenly. So I'm going to come down here and write my common denominators of 6. The 5/6 isn't going to change. If it's 6 on the bottom, it's going to stay 6. Okay, going to this one, how did I get from 3 to 6? I multiplied by 2. So if you multiply the 2 times the 2 as well, you get 4. Now you have a common denominator. Now you can do the subtraction in your head. So 5 minus 4 is 1 over your common denominator of 6. Your answer is 1/6. Remember, after I explain these, to pause and go ahead and copy all the work down and then resume. All right, next slide. This isn't super important to write down, but we just did everything with addition and subtraction, doing the opposite. You're going to do the same thing. We're going to move on to multiplication and division now. If a number is divided by the variable, to undivide it, you'll multiply it. And the same, when something's multiplied by the variable, to unmultiply it, you'll divide it. Now looking at here at a fraction in front, if you have a problem like 2/3 x, obviously the 2/3 is attached to the x by multiplication, so we need to divide it. But fractions are tricky. Let's go back to 5th grade, okay? Let's say you had 1/2 times 2/3, or not times, divided by 2/3. How did you divide the fraction? Okay, you multiplied by the reciprocal, because that's how it works. So we're going to go over here, we're going to put 1/2, multiply by 3 over 2. It's the same principle. So when you see this, you are dividing a fraction. There's nothing special about how we do it. But you just got to remember, when you divide a fraction, what you're really doing is multiplying by the reciprocal. And we'll practice that. All right. So here we go. Still one-step equations. Here we have s over 12 equal to 3. We look for our variable s. We look for the number on the same side as it, which is 12. And we see that it's attached by division. So we're going to unattach it. We're going to multiply. So to keep the equation equal, if we multiply by 12 on this side, we're going to also multiply by 12 over here. Here we have a 12 on the top and a 12 on the bottom. Those are going to actually cancel out. We're just going to bring down the s then. And on this side, we have 3 times 12, which is 36. This problem's a proportion. It's going to be a little bit different. It's actually going to be 2 steps because you got to set up your equation from the proportion. You'll have a couple of these. Okay? So you cross multiply. We already talked about how you would write a times 3. You wouldn't write it with the multiplication sign. You would just write the number first and write 3a. Then you're going to multiply the other 2 crosses. 18 times 2, and you're going to get 36. Now you've set up a simple one-step equation. You look for your variable a. You see that it's multiplied by the 3, so you need to divide it to do the opposite. So you'll divide through by 3 on both sides. This 3 and this 3 will cancel out to 1, so essentially 1 times a is a. Your a is by itself now. And 3 goes into 36 12 times. All right, we're going to look at this problem now. there's no way for you to do anything with an equation if you have mixed numbers. You actually have to convert them to improper, okay? Do your math, and then if you need to in the end, convert them back to mixed numbers. So right here, we have negative 1 3/8. That the negative's just going to come down to our improper fraction, okay? You kind of go in a backward circle motion to find your new numerator. So you're going to go 8 times 1, which is 8, plus 3 is 11. So your new numerator is 11, and your denominator is always the same. If it's an 8 here, it's going to be an 8 down here. Then transfer everything else down. The k equals 2/3. All right, and now we're going back to what we talked about on the last slide. We have a fraction, negative 11/8, and it is attached to our variable by multiplication. So to unattach it, we're going to multiply by the reciprocal. Keep in mind, when you do the reciprocal, you still have that negative. Okay, the denominator 8 is going to come up to the numerator, and the 11 is going to go down to the denominator. And if we're going to do that to the left side, we're going to have to do it to the right side. So negative 8 over 11 here too. All right, right here, your negatives both cancel out to positives. Your 8's on the top and the bottom cancel. Your 11's on the top and the bottom cancel. So that entire side cancels down to a nice little k. On the right side, it would be nice if we could cross cancel, but there's nothing, okay? Nothing goes into 3 and 8 or 2 and 11. So we're just stuck. Multiply the numerator times the numerator. 2 times negative 8 is negative 16 over the denominator times the denominator. 3 times 11 is 33. And there's our answer. All right, one last one on this slide here. Here we have two numbers that we have to make improper fractions. Okay, so first we're going to do 4 1/3. So we're going to do 3 times 4, which is 12, plus 1 is 13. So we'll end up with 13 over 3, our common denominator. Put our variable back. On this one, we have 5 times 7, which is 35, plus 3 is 38. So we'll have 38 over 7. Again, we have a 3 and a 3 for denominator on the first one, and a 7 and a 7 for the denominator on the second. The denominators do not change. Again, just like on the last problem, we're multiplying by the reciprocal. The reciprocal of 13/3 is 3/13. All right, 3's and 13's cancel and we get m. Still nothing to simplify this. Okay, so we have 38 times 3. We end up with 114. 7 times 13, we get 91. That's unacceptable. That's improper. Okay, now we're at the end. Now we got to make everything to a mixed number again. That's the proper way to do it. 91 is going to go into 114 one full time, and you're going to have 23 left over. Our numerator, or our denominator here is 91. Our denominator on our answer is going to be 91. So our final answer is 1 and 23 over 91. You cannot give me a decimal answer unless you have a decimal in the problem. Keep that in mind. All right, we're going to practice a couple more of these. We identify our variable. It's a b. The negative 15 is attached. A lot of people see that and want to add 15 to both sides. But that's not the relationship between the variable and the negative 15. The relationship is multiplication. So we're going to do the opposite of multiplication and divide. So we're going to divide by negative 15 on both sides. You'll see that our b ends up on the right side. That's completely acceptable. That's fine. It doesn't matter as long as it's solved for that specific single variable. It doesn't matter what side it's on. Negative 75 divided by negative 15 is going to give you a positive 5. Next one here, we have the negative 14 times the c. Okay, the opposite of times or multiplication's division. So just like on the last problem, we're going to divide by negative 14. Okay, this is a little bit of a trick. 14 doesn't go evenly into 32. You cannot just break out your calculator and try to do the math. You have to actually learn fractions, right? So this is going to be c because the 14s will cancel. Now, not only does this fraction need to be reduced, but it also needs to be converted to a mixed number. I'm going to reduce first, then I'm going to go through and put it into a mixed number. So if I look at 32 and 14 and see what they have in common, the only thing that they have in common is a 2. So the only thing I can reduce these by is 2. So if I take 32 and reduce it by 2, I end up with 16. And if I take 14 and reduce it by 2, I end up with 7. We're still not done because it's improper. 7 is going to go into 16 2 full times. Make sure to put that negative out front of the 2 so we bring the negative down. And that gives you 14, so we still have 2 left. So it's going to be 2 sevenths. Okay, our denominator is still the same, 7. All right. Let's go back to the beginning and kind of combine. So now we're not only are we going to write it out, but we're going to solve it. Okay. So 14 more than a number. So here we have 14 more than plus, but reverse order. A number, I'm just going to use n. It starts with n. Is equal to 27. So if I write this problem out correctly, just go right here in the middle. We have n plus 14 equals 27. To solve for n, go back to what we learned in the beginning. You subtract 14, and n is going to equal 13. Remember, these are one-step equations, and you'll have a lot of word problems on your homework. Make sure when you're doing the word problems that you don't make them more complicated than they have to be. It is actually just a one-step equation. All right, next one, we have negative 14. Just going to go ahead and write it. Times a number, so I'm just not going to write the times. I'm just going to write the n. Equals 224. The n is attached to the 14 by multiplication. To unmultiply it, we'll divide. So I'm going to divide by negative 14, divide by negative 14. And n is going to end up equaling 16. And negative, don't forget that negative, right? We had a positive and a negative in our problem. Different signs means it's a subtraction or a negative. All right, last one here before we get started on our homework. 2.7 times a number. Again, we don't need times when we're looking at a number and a variable. We'll just write 2.7n equals 8.37. This is the only problem on this entire homework assignment where it's going to be acceptable to give me a decimal answer. And the only reason that's the case is because there's a decimal in the problem. Okay, so keep in mind, fractions unless there's decimals in the problem. So we're going to go through the 2.7's attached to the n by multiplication. We're going to divide through by 2.7. Okay, those cancel. And if you use a calculator, which you're fine to do, n ends up being 3.1. And that's your answer. Okay, so go ahead and get started on your homework, and good luck.